Hi, it's Matt Allington here, and I'm going to do a follow-up video today from my previous video where I produced this report that you can see on the screen. What I did was I used a function to go and fetch data from the web so that I could see the total number of cases of COVID in Australia over time. And so I've got this function report in place, and you can watch my other video if you'd like to see how I did that. But now what I thought I would do is just show you how I'm going to visualize the data using some of the capabilities within Power BI. So I haven't really got a clear understanding of what I want to do yet. So I'm just going to do a few things. I'll come up here first of all. I like to use these under general. I like to use effects and turn on this shadow. Some people don't like it. I personally like it. I just think it makes the visuals stand out a little bit on the page. So I'll do the same thing over here, turn on the shadow. I always like to keep some symmetry in my reports. So if this page is just going to be a report showing me cases for one selected state. So I just try and keep the spaces here and here pretty consistent. I'll leave some space at the top for a text box explaining what this chart is. And so this automatically is looking a little bit better, more presentable. In fact, I probably don't need as much space here. So let me just zoom in over there. Okay, so the next thing I think I'll do is put a slicer for the date, because you can see there's this long tail, and if maybe I'd like to have a look at this data over here. So there's a few ways of doing this. I could just add a slicer to the page, add my calendar date. In this case, this sort of slider is actually quite a good tool, and then I can actually zoom in and have a look at just the later period when the cases started to take off. So this is one good way of doing it. In fact, I'm not going to do that. What I'll do is I'll come over to this line chart, because there is a feature available called a zoom slider. So I'll turn that off, and it actually embeds that same sort of date slider in the axis here. And in fact, you can see I've got the slider here as well. So this one here allows me to zoom into a different part of the axis if I wanted to have a look at a different part. But in this case, I don't want to do that. So I'll turn off the y-axis and I'll just leave the zoom slider on the x-axis. So that's looking pretty good. Now, as I zoom in here, you'll notice that these case rates are pretty spiky. And the reality is that when they do testing, it follows a seasonal pattern. It's probably a weekly pattern. So that's Wednesday. That's Wednesday. So you can see the peaks are on sort of Wednesday or Thursday. And that's just a testing reality. So less tests over the weekend and so on. So it would make sense for this data to put a smooth line. So a smooth average line would make much more sense. So I'm going to write a measure. And so instead of looking at the raw cases, I'm going to do a smooth 7-day average. So I'll call this, so that's the name of my measure. Now, to do a smooth 7-day average, I'll use the dates in period function, which allows me to pick the last 7 days. So I'm going to define that as a variable, and I'll call this my period. And so I'm going to use dates in period, and I need to know the calendar table date column. So that's calendar date. And I need to know the starting date. So I'm going to use max of the calendar date. And so what this part of the formula does, so if I'm hovering on this data point, there's only a single data point that's being selected. And so when I select max of that data point, it's going to return the date that I'm actually highlighting. So in this case, 1st of June, 2002. So the max function in this case tells me the date that I'm starting from. And then I need to go back 7 periods, and the type of period I want to go back is a day. That's my period table filter. And so now I can go return, and I'll go calculate the sum of the new cases. But I'm going to use my period as the filter, and that should give me a rolling 7-day number. Let's throw it on the chart and have a look. And that doesn't look right. So what I needed to do was divide it by 7. So divide by 7. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. A nice smoothed rolling 7-day average. The reason I broke the period out into a separate variable is that, technically speaking, I don't need to divide it by 7. I need to divide it by 7 after the 7th day of data has been collected, because on the first day data has been collected, I've only got one data point. So if I divide it by 7, technically that's going to be incorrect. So I'm going to do a count rows of the period table. So what this enables me to do is actually work out how many rows are in my period table and then divide it by that number of rows to get the average. I guess I could have looked at doing some sort of average function instead, but that's the way I like to do it. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I've got a state selector here, and I've got my smoothed average. What might be nice is to change the title of this chart. So what I'll do is I'll write a measure that gives me the title that I want that responds to this slicer, and then I'll use expression-based formatting to set the title. So it's arguable where I should put this. I think I'll put it in the state table, and I'll call this my single chart title. And so to do this, I'll just say total, and I need to concatenate the state name. And so I'll do a concatenate. I need to know what state is selected. And so I'll select this and go selected value of the state. And let's test that out. And I'll click on here, come up to the general title, switch to expression-based formatting. The field value in this case is going to be my single chart title. And so now when I select a value here, the chart title updates to give me that information. Now there's a flaw in what I just wrote, because if I multi-select here, I am aggregating the cases across multiple states, but my chart title is not working. And so what I might do is I'll come back. So in order to do this, I would need to concatenate all the states that are collected here. So what I will do is I'll do a concatenate X, and the table will be my state table. And I'm going to take the name of the state and concatenate it with a comma space in the case that there's more than one state. So let's have a look at that. So now when I select and multi-select, I get the list of states. If I just select a single state, it doesn't give me the comma, so that's pretty good. What might be nice in this case is to add the word combined. So if I have multi-state selected Queensland SA, it'd be nice if it says total cases in Queensland, SA combined. Now to do that, it'll take a little bit more work. So I think what I'll do is I'll turn this into a variable, and I'll put another variable before that, which will be total selected. And that can be count rows of state table. So the state table is going to react based on the filter here. And so this is either going to be 1, 2, and so on. And so what I can do is I can concatenate at the back here something that says if total selected is greater than 1, then I also want to concatenate space combined. Otherwise, I want to leave it blank. Find a variable, and I've got to return the title. Okay, so when I've got multi-states selected, it's working. I could go on, I could make the concatenation so it says and, so Queensland, Tas, and SA combined, but you have to draw the line somewhere. And if I select a single state, it doesn't display the word combined. So that's quite a nice improvement on the interactivity of this chart. Okay, so that's my first report, which is a single state report. I'm now going to build a second report. So I don't want to redo everything that I've done here. So I'll just right click and duplicate the page. And I'm going to call this states compared. Now what I'd like to do is bring a state in as a legend. Now I'm pretty sure I can't do that if I've got two measures. So I'm going to just leave the 7-day average on the chart, and then I'll bring the state in as a legend. And at this stage I've only got one state, but when I multi-select by control clicking, I can now overlay the states like this. My title is no longer appropriate here because this is not data combined. What I really need is a title that says total new cases comparing New South Wales, Queensland, and so on. So once again, I'm going to reuse this measure that I created before. Come in here, copy, and I'll paste a new measure. And this one will be states compared, chart title. So I need the same concept, total new cases in that, and instead of combined, I'll do compared. And of course I need to come and change my title here so that it uses the correct measure. So come into here and I'll select the new measure. Okay, so that's the second chart. I will come back and put some headers on these pages later on, but this is the second chart that allows me to overlay any two states worth of data. Okay, now the next thing that occurs to me is that the populations in these states are different. And what would be really nice would be able to come up with the per 1 million people view of this chart, so I can divide the cases by the total population. And so to do that, I'm going to need to get the population for each state and load that up into my transactional table. So that is certainly a bigger exercise, and I'm going to leave that for a future video. All right, one more thing I'm going to do before I wrap up this video is I'm going to create a small multiples chart. So I'm just once again going to duplicate this page, and I'll just call this states compared all. I'll get rid of this, and I'll get rid of the legend. And now what I'll do is I'll bring in the state and overlay it as a small multiple. So when I do that, I get this experience. I'm going to come and configure. So we've got 8 states. So I'll configure this as being 4 columns and 2 rows. And I'll just take up the canvas size that I've got available here, leaving space for some titles down the track. And so now you can see that I'm overlaying all of the states on the one page. Once again, this is done based on the population size. Later on, when I do have the population data, I'll turn this into cases per million.